being a financial planner is about the money, the modeling, taxes, IRS codes. It's like knowing those technical things, those quantitative things. But it is equally a relationship business. It is equally a communication business. It is understanding, hey, this client is a business owner and they really just want bottom line it for me. Like, don't overwhelm me with details. Just tell me bottom line, what do I need to do? Versus this client, they're both retired engineers. They really like to see every line of the cash flow.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Connected Advisor. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder and CEO of Milemarker. And today I am joined by Jessica Gibbs. Jessica is vice president and partner at Monument Wealth Management. She is the mom of 2 boys. She is a military spouse, and she is an aspiring gardener. Jessica, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I've got to ask you, as somebody who has a lot of relatives who are or were in the military, what branch of the military are you a spouse?
My husband is in the Army. He's active duty. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for his service. Thank him for his service for us. It's much appreciated. Okay, Jessica, I ask every guest the same question to start all of these off. It's going to be no different. So over all of these conversations, whether on air or off air, I have found that everybody has their own unique path to this industry. Some people, it's a traditional path. They're following in family footsteps and they're trying to, live up to the legacy that's been put before them. Some people came in through the side door and they had no idea what this industry was. They were doing something completely different and they stumbled into it. But what I've found is no matter whether your path is traditional or it's untraditional, everybody has what we call a money moment. And that's a moment in your life where that light bulb sort of went off, an interaction, a book you read, something that happened where you said, this is it. This is what I want to do for my career. This is how I want to spend my time. So Jessica, for you, what was that money moment that led you to sitting in the chair you're in right now?
It was listening to a podcast, which is just ironic enough, given that we are on a podcast, but I swear it was the story. So I graduated college in 2009. I have a degree in political science. I was willing to take any job that would take me, as you can imagine, someone graduating into that job market. So for me, I landed at the Brookings Institution, which is a large public policy think tank in DC. I landed in their fundraising department, and it really was a terrific place to start out my career. I got to meet incredible people, see incredible people speak. I was working primarily with their board of trustees, which were giving substantially to the organization. It's a nonprofit, so I got to understand charitable giving from the impact of, or from the perspective of the organization, what they look for and how they work with donors. It also gave me good insight into working with high net worth individuals, the type of personalization or customization that really speaks to them, communicating, in a way that they connect with, finding their giving priorities and connecting it to what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So I really got a good baseline understanding of a lot of things, but fundraising is really hard. I have a lot of respect for anyone who is a professional fundraiser for a nonprofit. It's often a thankless job. And so I knew, whereas, I was learning interesting things, developing good skills, it was not going to be the profession for me. And I really struggled with figuring out what it is that I wanted to do. Until one morning, I like to listen to podcasts as I get ready in the morning. I was out of my usual, my episodes from my usual shows. And so I just went to what's the suggested for you type episodes.
Wow.
I clicked on one that I thought, well, this looks interesting. What it was an episode that was a partnership between American Public Media's Marketplace Money and the New York Times. They interviewed people all throughout the country, different life stages, different sort of questions, financial planning questions. And it really struck me that I was like, oh my God, this is a subject matter that I've always loved learning about. I was that kid who read Money Magazine in high school. I opened my first Vanguard account when I got my first job and invested, in a mutual fund. I talked to my friends about hey, do you have an investment account? It was also a profession where I thought, hey, I'm the type of person where maybe I don't have like a bazillion friends, but like the friends that I've had, I've known for decades. So I'm like really good at building long-term relationships. I'm that kid who in middle school, my friends were always compliment me like, oh, you're a great listener. Like I am a natural, like born listener. Then I took to, okay, what is this profession, financial planner? Because I didn't know that it really existed. So then, you take to the internet and you say, okay, financial planner. Oh, the Department of Labor says it's like one of the top 5 growing careers at the time. I was like, that's great. I was also dating my now husband at the time. I knew, he's going to be in the military. I wanted a transferable skill, something that I could do anywhere in the country, depending on where our journey took us. So that was another plus. I chatted with someone who had done continuing education courses at Georgetown School of Continuing Studies. She had a really great experience there. Great. They have this thing called the Certified Financial Planner. So I can actually learn like how to do this profession. Oh, Georgetown, great. They've got that school. Okay. They've got a course in that. So the ball just like kept running. And so I enrolled in CFP courses while I was working full-time at Brookings. I really kind of got a better sense of like, yes, this is a career that I want to have, but it's just making sure also at that point that I was landing in the right spot. I really came to understand at that point that I wanted a small boutique firm where I really would have those personal connections with clients. And thankfully, through informational interviewing, I found Monument, where I have been with since 2015, so almost 10 years.
There's a couple questions I want to ask based off of that. But the first one I'm going to start with, though, is we've actually found people who started kind of in the nonprofit realm or fundraising realm. It translates really well into this side of the world. And so that's quite the unique skill set to come into the industry thinking about. I think the question I have for you is, what are some of the differences between trying to guide someone to invest or donate to a philanthropic cause versus like investing in themselves, right? And in their future. Do you see any hard differences there as you sit across the table from someone and it's their future rather than trying to help people donate in, the future of a bigger organization or something along those lines?
So at Monument, we focus a lot on building wealth with purpose. And by that, I mean like your goal with your wealth should not be more, quote unquote. Purpose means things to different people. So if charitable giving is part of that purpose, then I think it is a really interesting piece to incorporate into someone's plan. It's definitely not, I'm not recommending that someone give to charity at the expense of being able to fund their other goals and objectives. It's just making sure that charitable giving is a part of the conversation. It's part of the plan that we're building for them. And also just thinking about how to do it strategically. When it comes to your financial plan, I'm a big believer in you identify your goals and objectives, you do the same thing with your charitable giving. So I think when I talk to clients who are interested in charitable giving, I'm having an in-depth conversation with them about what are your goals and objectives for your charitable plan, what strategic choices can we make, like things like a donor advised fund, annual giving versus transformational giving larger gifts, like how to have that conversation even. We're approaching it from the standpoint of like, what are your goals and for philanthropy and how can we support those? It's very similar in my mind to how you would approach a personal financial planning conversation.
That's awesome. I love that answer. That's a great answer. One of the things that Monument is pretty unashamed about, rather, is that you are outspoken critics of the financial industry. And I think it's interesting to talk about this now based off of what you just said of, hey, we're really trying to help people build wealth with purpose. There seems to be a lot of intentionality. I think a lot of people, RIAs or advisors I talk to would feel similarly about that. So I'm just going to kind of give you the open-ended question of like, what makes you an outspoken critic of the financial industry and where did that come from?
I think it really just comes from, I think our founders have a big piece in that. They really set the tone for what they wanted to be, breaking off from a big broker dealer, founding an independent, RIA. They really wanted something that was very different from what they were used to. They didn't want to be the people who wore suits every day. They didn't want to be the people who, I'm sorry, I maybe am a certified financial planner, but I can't give you that financial planning advice because I have to send it up to the financial planning team. I can't answer that question directly, or, limits on how we can communicate with clients. So I think that desire just to be plain language, straightforward, unfiltered in a respect, came from a desire just to be the antithesis of what they came from before they founded Monument. But, Monument was founded in 2008. That culture it has really bloomed, and it's just embedded in how everyone works here at Monument. Like, our goal is constantly, we are going to explain things in a way that is very plain language. A client can understand it. We're going to give our straightforward opinion on what we think you should do, not just tell a client, hey, you could do this or you could do this. We're going to tell you, you could do this or you could do this. We think you should do this, and here's why. Also, just coming at it from a perspective of like, we have a whole team. We are an ensemble practice. And, so every client gets this team of advisors that comes with their own different expertise, their different experience. There has been many times since I've been at Monument where we're in a meeting with a client and someone says something from their perspective, and maybe then another person or me like chimes in of like, hey, I'm actually thinking about this from a different perspective, and it might kind of lead to a different answer. Like, we're not afraid to kind of not disagree in front of a client, like kind of bring different like points of view. And that way the client can really see, oh, there's kind of this whole shape. So I think how we just approach talking to clients, communicating to clients, how we approach financial planning and money management is just, I think, different than and what the industry traditionally has been as far as broker dealers and jargon and very defined roles on who can say what and do what and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well stated. And I think one of the ways that you have a lot of those conversations outside of conference rooms or things like that with clients is you actually have your own podcast. Is that right?
We do. Yes. It's called Off the Wall. So I co-host it with Dave Armstrong, who's one of the founders of Monument.
Okay, that's awesome. I was going to say, I was trying to put two and two together here. I met him a long time ago in a previous life.
Yeah?
And yes. So we'll have to catch up with him, off mic here a little bit. But is that used as a way to connect with clients? Because I'm always interested when I see RIAs that have podcasts, because I think, obviously I'm a fan of the medium as we're sitting here doing it, but is that a way for you to connect with clients and reach them? Is that a way for you to try and create thought leadership in the industry? Like, when you guys set out to do that podcast, what was the goal for the firm and for you all to be successful with that?
So I think, originally when we created the podcast, it was a little bit of an experiment. Dave and I both being people who like listening to podcasts, let's try making our own and kind of experiment. That's definitely something that's baked into the DNA at Monument. So I think our initial goal was we kind of wanted to attract people who maybe are kind of like learning about Monument, but we don't know about them yet. And I think podcasts are a great way for someone to find us and listen to how we think, our personalities, how we interact with each other, our experience. Like, do you have experience working with people that are like me, that are dealing with this issue? We have a quarterly episode on our market commentary. I feel like that's a really interesting way for people to get to know, like, how do we think about managing money? What is our investment philosophy? So it started as a way for thinking, okay, this is a way for people to kind of like be a fly on the wall while we're having these types of conversations already in the conference room together. This would be a way for someone to listen in. And I think over time, it's evolved into a way our clients listen to it, obviously. So we've gotten some really great feedback there. It's a great way to engage with clients who like podcasts. It's a great opportunity too, to get their feedback on like, hey, what do you think we should do an episode on? It's kind of a nice way to engage them. I think it's also a great way for us to engage some of our advocates, our COIs that we work with, because these are incredible people. So we've had, trust and estate attorneys on that we work with frequently, and it's nice to be able to showcase them and get them to share their expertise, because I know they're great. But I think it's also become a way for us to think about who is our target client and like what issues are they facing beyond just investing and financial planning questions. So we've had episodes where we've had topics about like upping your leadership game with executive coaches, managing stock compensation, banishing burnout, as well as those types of estate planning conversations. We've had episode about being in the sandwich generation, which that's being kind of in between having young kids and also having aging parents. So trying to think beyond and think about who is it that our client is, who is our target client as far as attracting new people to Monument, and what are the issues that they're facing, and making sure we're speaking to that in these episodes.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn because kind of at the end of that, you were talking about who is Monument, and that's attracting clients to Monument, which I think is awesome. By the way, I love that you all bring on COIs to the podcast. We've talked about that with other folks on this podcast where I think everybody talks about you got to grow through COIs and everything like that, but there tends to kind of be this like, well, how do I do that? Do I go get 500 COI relationships? Do I get 5 really close ones? What's the deal? So I love that you're doing that. But my left-hand turn is you kind of had this interesting experience of coming out of the Brookings Institute, knowing you wanted to be a planner, but then going through this process of finding a firm that fit you. And my question for you is, I think a lot of the people that come on this podcast, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are firms that are either trying to recruit other advisors to come and join the firm because they're growing through that way. They're trying to differentiate. They're trying to stand out. And I think everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what are the mechanisms that we can use to make ourselves really show up, right? Beyond just, we try to do what's right by our clients. We offer good investment solutions. We are planning first or whatever. So for you, what was it that stood out about Monument? Because I'm sure you probably could have gone to a host of different firms, especially in the greater DC area. I know there's a bunch of great independent firms that are out there. So I think, I'm always curious, and I know people listening to this are curious, like what makes an RIA stand out to talent and to people who are going to come and help be a part of the business?
It's really funny that you asked that question because you're right. When I was interviewing places, I had already met Monument at that point. Through informational interviews, I had met Monument. They were very kind to invite me to come down occasionally and shadow their planner so that I could see what financial planning in practice looked like. I could see eMoney, the planning software, how to approach it. So I'd kind of gotten to know them kind of over the course of a year before I really was actively interviewing. And every time I interviewed at a firm, Monument was kind of the yardstick that I measured. I said, how does this firm sort of measure up to Monument? It was really kind of the gold standard in my mind. And so I was very thankful when they just asked me at the end, when I was asking them, hey, I have job offers from these firms. What do you know about them? And they said to me, do you just want to work here? And I said, yes, I do, because it was the place that everywhere else I was like, well, this isn't quite the same as Monument. So I think for me, what really stood out at that time, and I think what's been really good, as I've grown here, is I think it was truly collaborative. I think I understood at that time that being in an ensemble practice was going to be a better fit for me compared to someone who has their own book of business. I think I also at the time recognized that I really didn't have the skills to go out and be immediately trying to build my own book of business. I didn't have a network already of high net worth individuals that I could go to. So understanding that my role starting out was to be a planner and that business development was not something that was on my shoulders, it was a little freeing because it just gave me that time to really learn the profession, learn how to give advice. Because I think when I talk about this, it's like, yes, being a financial planner is about the money, the modeling, taxes, IRS codes, it's like knowing those technical things, those quantitative things. But it is equally a relationship business. It is equally a communication business. It is understanding, hey, this client is a business owner and they really just want bottom line it for me. Like, don't overwhelm me with details. Just tell me bottom line, what do I need to do? Versus this client, they're both retired engineers. They really like to see every line of the cash flow. So knowing how to modulate how you're presenting, how you're communicating, knowing how to explain technical things in a way that is plain language that people will not, people will understand, will not make them feel stupid. Like, oh, that was really above my head and I don't want to be embarrassed for asking what may be a dumb question. So I think Monument just really embodied that approach of we're going to talk to people like they're people. We're not, they're not a client, that this is a person, that we are working with them for ideally a really long time. And that's what we've seen with Monument is people have been clients for 15 or more years, many of them. I think what was also really stand out at Monument compared to peers at my other firm, once I started, okay, I'm now working at Monument, I'm joining things like the Financial Planning Association's Next Gen group, which is for younger planners. So I'm meeting my peers at other firms in the DC area. I think what really stood out to me was my very first week, for example, I sat in on a client meeting. I didn't say anything, but I was put into a position. I was trusted by the partners to like, hey, we hired you. You're a smart person. We're going to put you in the role. We're not going to keep you in the back room and, make you sort of figure out, well, how do I move from being a paraplanner to being more of a planner or being in front of clients? I was put in front of clients from the very first week. And that gave me a massive leg up in terms of figuring out that communication aspect of like, how do you present to clients in a meeting? How do you convey this work? And it was over time, I went from, okay, just observing to, okay, Jessica, you're going to lead this like teeny tiny part. You're going to do the education funding projection, for their kids' college. So getting that practice and then slowly building over time. Monument is really built on the ethos of like see one, do one, teach one. So I see it done and I'm going to practice doing it myself and then I'm going to teach someone else how to do it. So I think that was just really different, I think, from other firms that are maybe just more of a traditional mold. I think here we empower everyone to find good solutions, to think of new creative ideas for our clients, and to give them the best advice.
That is really well explained and really well thought out. Because I think this is another theme that we talk about a lot here, which is the old way of coming into this industry, regardless of what the firm was, kind of a sink or swim model. You're going to come in, you've got to do all the business development, you've got to figure out how to plan for these folks and whatever. And, it's pretty well documented that we've struggled for a long time of getting younger people into the industry. Mm-hmm. But I think, for better or for worse, no matter how confident, no matter how amazing, a 20-something-year-old trying to get a retiree to give them their life savings that's just a difficult proposition.
Yep.
So the models that are now being created to let people learn the business and be able to develop that experience and be able to go to those business development meetings with the experiences that you're talking about, I think is a much more powerful perspective.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well. And we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is jud@milemarker.co. And I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
I think my question on that though, too, is like maybe the other side of it is, did you start to get antsy a little bit of, hey, I want to go faster. I feel like I'm getting my arms around this. I want to start to do more. I want to get more responsibility. Or did you feel like the pace worked out pretty well?
I think the pace worked pretty well for me. I think just reflecting back, I think it was a pretty steady evolution from financial planning associate to senior financial planner to director of private wealth design. And then in 2021, I became a partner along with Emily Harper. So for me, I think it has been a steady growth. I think things that along the line were like sort of good experiences that took me to the next level were I did the G2 Leadership Institute through the ensemble practice. As I kind of think as almost like a preparation to becoming partner, I think David Armstrong and Dean Catino, who are the co-founders of Monument, they've spoken to me kind of in retrospect that, me doing the G2 Leadership Institute, they were kind of looking and being like, what is she going to bring back to Monument? Like, how is she going to take this type of leadership course and how's she going to apply that? And it was almost kind of like a little bit of a yardstick of like, hey, is she ready to be partner or not? So I think there were good things along the way that maybe when I felt maybe I sort of had reached a sort of level set as far as being a planner, I was pushing myself in terms more of like, learning how the business is run and other sort of how can I think, strategically about running the business, about managing others, not just managing myself. So there were things like that where I then grew as a leader within the firm and still, did the planning work as well.
Awesome. I love that. All right. So that's actually a good segue into the next thing I want to talk about. So you went from learning a lot of the building blocks of being a successful planner advisor, and then you go through the G2 Leadership Summit to become, a leader of an RIA. And I think one of the things that great leaders have to do is kind of peek around the corner, look into the future and see what's going to happen in the industry and best position your firm for what's coming. So I always like to ask people on this show to get out their crystal ball, look a couple years into the future, and tell me kind of what it is that you are trying to best prepare for as a leader and a partner at your firm. So what do you see in your crystal ball right now?
I think something that is maybe very close to my heart and something that I've always focused on as a financial planner is that wealth is going to be changing hands to women and younger generations. I think you mentioned earlier about like challenges of younger people coming into this profession. I still think we have a massive challenge with women entering this profession as well. I think, the industry has traditionally been a male-dominated industry. Unfortunately, you go to conferences and you look around the room and it's still majority men. To put statistics on it, I keep my eye on the CFP board's demographics. And right now, you go on their site, 23% of CFPs are women. And that number really hasn't changed for many years. It's been hovering around 20% for many years. So I think that having women representation within the industry is so important to making sure that you are speaking effectively to female clients. I think it just helps when you have someone across the table who shares a similar experience with you, knows kind of where you're coming from, knows what you're thinking about. Unfortunately, some people might have implicit biases towards like, I'm just going to sort of speak to the husband, like give him eye contact, or I'm going to talk about it's his money when really it's their money. I think there's these sneaky things within the industry that still exist that are a bit gendered biased. So with money changing hands really to women and younger generations coming up, I think is so important to making sure that you have more female advisors at the table that are going to be able to connect with these clients.
Great answer. So with that being the case, and you see that coming down the pike, what are some things to resolve that? I mean, I know there's lots of people who are trying to resolve that. There's like great organizations that are popping up and things like that, but obviously you can't boil the ocean. What are you doing and what is Monument doing to try and help solve that problem?
I think having a firm culture that supports the ability to equally contribute at work and be present at home is so important. And I don't mean this just as like, oh, this should be work-life balance for women. Like I think about, I was in a very unique position to like write Monument's parental leave policy. It was very important to me that this would be a policy that both new moms and new fathers would be able to take advantage of. I also think it's important when it comes to like, you may have aging parents. So that ability to have work-life balance, to have flexibility, to be present in these personal issues, I think is really important. It's really built into Monument's culture through things like we have unlimited paid time off policy. Remote work is something that we're open to. So we have a few remote members of our team. For me personally, when my husband received orders for us to move from the DC area to San Antonio, Texas, it was something where, I said, hey, I don't want to leave Monument. And they said, hey, we don't want to lose you. So I was actually kind of a guinea pig of moving to Texas in 2018. And I worked there remotely for 4 years while he was stationed there. And then thankfully he was moved back to DC and I'm now back here in the DC area. So having an openness about ideas around remote work, paid time off, including also, a 4-day work week. It's something that we have been doing at Monument successfully for a few years now. And the idea is not, oh, we're going to make everyone work like 10-hour days, 4 days a week. We took the approach of like, okay, it's still 8 hours, 4 days a week. And Fridays is really, we call it our on-call day. So it's the day where, we're not going to have client meetings that day. It's the day where, you need to like take your kids to the doctor, get your hair cut, like, sort of you have that flexibility. Everyone's got Teams on their phone now. People are connected in terms of being able to like answer a Teams call that comes in, to our phone or reply to something. But it just gives you that kind of breathing room to either do life stuff that you need to do or like do the heads down work that maybe like Monday through Thursday, it was a lot of meetings this week, and I just need to be able to focus on this thing that I've been doing.
Awesome. That's great. It's always interesting to hear about people who've instituted like a 4-day work week or different things like that. Because this is maybe going to be my last question I ask you before we slide into the final segment of the show. But even outside of our industry, I think there's a lot of chatter around, we've had all of this technological innovation, all of these things that are supposed to create efficiency gains. Have we actually allowed those to create efficiency, or what? And I think the idea of like going to a 4-day work week or some of these other things are experiments or things that I see people doing that are a nod to technological efficiency or the gains that we've gotten there. So I know that's one of your guiding principles is trying to automate and leverage technology as best as you can. Is that one of the things that allows you to be able to do this? Or comment on your use of technology at Milemarker?
I mean, I think technology in the sense of like using Teams, for example, is definitely one of those things. It was actually kind of nice that I was the guinea pig on figuring out like how to use Teams to like remotely join a meeting and using chat and some of those things when I started working remotely in 2018. And then it was very nice. Then come the pandemic, it was, a pretty seamless transition for Monument into everyone working remotely because we had already figured out the technology aspect and figured out a bit of the cultural aspect of like, how do you work with someone where you can't just stand up or yell across the desk and ask a question. So I think that was a really important way that we've been using technology. But I also think, we really like to use technology. It's just one of the sort of ingrained things we do within the firm. I think like from a planning perspective, we're always trying to think of like, where can we add value to the client? And so something, for example, that we did was like, okay, it would be really great to kind of take a client's assets and show them, hey, what's a probate asset? What's a non-probate asset? What's out of your estate? So that they can really see that picture very clearly on one page. Okay, well, when we started doing that, we did it via Excel, like here I am, like making the boxes and typing in the things. And now we use a platform called Vanilla, which is a great estate planning tool, which can do those types of illustrations for us. Also, on the tax planning side, we really are leveraging Holistaplan right now because that's a really great way where we can model scenarios. They have a really awesome, hey, import your return, and here it spits out a really nice report. So I think looking at technology in a way of like, what can we do that's going to add value to the client? And then I think from the marketing perspective, we're also looking at how can we produce content like the podcast, for example. So we can have an episode of Off the Wall. We're going to produce it in video, and then we're going to take that episode and we're going to chop it up in a bunch of different ways. We're going to have, short social media clips. We're going to create longer LinkedIn posts. We are going to then create articles either that are on our website, or we've had a lot of success where we actually kind of co-write them with our guest, get them put on our guest's website, backlinked to Monument. Like it's a great way to kind of take content that's done once and then we can chop it up in a bunch of different ways, basically scale it, repurpose it. And it's just been a lot more efficient rather than like, okay, we're going to do this one article and then we're going to go and we're going to do another article and we're going to like do each thing individually. And it's going to take all that effort every time.
Excellent. Great response. Great. I love it. This is awesome. I can tell you have your own podcast. You've got this.
Thank you. I feel like the podcast has definitely been a personal skill that I have learned, and that's been part of its fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we are going to move into the final segment of the show, a little bit more lighthearted in nature. We call this the Milemarker Minute. So it's a series of lightning round questions. The goal is to try and have all of the questions answered in 60 seconds or less.
Okay.
So you think you're ready for the Milemarker Minute?
I'm ready.
All right, fantastic. If you could travel one place in the world that you've never been to before, where would you go?
Scotland.
Excellent. Do you like the mountains or the beach more?
Beach.
What is the best book that you've read in the last 12 months?
I'm into cozy murder mysteries right now, which is just kind of a funny sounding genre. So I'm currently reading The Thursday Murder Club, which I'm really enjoying.
Okay, I love that. If we live in an alternate universe now, so I'm speaking to Jessica Gibbs, who's partner at Monument. But in this alternate universe, you're not allowed to be a financial planner. You're not allowed to be that. So, what kind of career does Jessica Gibbs have in this alternate universe?
I'm owning a beautiful stationery store filled with all sorts of lovely paper products and notebooks and pens and just delightful things.
Excellent. That's a very cool answer. All right. And then my last question, we are actually recording this kind of in the midst of holidays. So we kind of just got done with Thanksgiving. We're in the getting ready to head into the winter holiday season. And I know that you have spent quite a bit of time in nonprofits. So are there any causes right now that you care about that you kind of want to shout out to anybody on the podcast?
I do. I have been donating ever since I became a parent. I've been donating to the Greater DC Diaper Bank, which I know probably sounds a little funny, but as someone who thankfully can go out and easily afford to spend $40 or $50 on a box of diapers, I cannot imagine being in a position where someone is making a choice about how they're going to get diapers or wipes or formula for their baby. Those things are essential. They're not basics, they're essential. So I am very happy to support them again this year.
Great answer. That actually hits close to home for me because when we had our first kid, we were not in the strongest of financial positions. We were okay. We were making ends meet. We were getting by. Our church ran a massive diaper drive similar to what you're talking about. And we didn't have to buy diapers for a year.
Amazing.
And I mean, that was truly like one of the most impactful things that happened to us in the first year of our daughter's life. And so I love that you do that. I think that's incredible. And, to everybody listening to this, if you get an opportunity or, you feel moved by that, go buy a box of diapers, drop it off somewhere because it really does make a difference, even if you feel like it's small.
Yep.
So great answer, Jessica. That's a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some insights about joining our industry, what it means to be philanthropic, your experience running a podcast yourself, and then all of the other wonderful insights of working with clients and things like that. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, everybody, that's been another episode of The Connected Advisor. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And if you'd be kind enough, please go drop a review wherever you're listening to this as well, so more people can find great conversations like the one we just had with Jessica. But until the next episode, enjoy every mile.